Hi, I'm Moshe, and I'm autistic.
I'm Leah, and I'm boring. Welcome to the Now You Know One Autistic podcast.
The opinions expressed in this podcast reflect one autistic and one Leah, and don't necessarily reflect the entire autistic community.
Let's get to it.
Hi, Leah.
Hi, Moshe.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm amazing. Today we're joined by the amazing Dr. Temple Grandin, and we don't actually have a script or
do we ever
outline, so we're just gonna get started. Welcome to the show, Dr. Grandin.
It's great to be here.
So before we actually started recording, you were talking to Leah and I about, providing some extra support for children and your thoughts on that. I'd love to have you repeat what you were talking about.
It's really important that if you have a 3-year-old that's not talking, that you get very quickly into a good early intervention educational program. Now, there's certain parts of the U.S. and in other places where kids are being put on a 2-year wait list. And that's not acceptable. We need to be starting therapy now. So what can we do about it? Well, I was out with one group. I'm not going to say where it was in the U.S., but I was out with farming, and I suggested they start library play. We'll call it that because we can't call it therapy. Mm-hmm. That's what we're actually going to be doing. And get retired teachers and grandmothers to start working with these kids now. And the thing I have found is that it's not rocket science. And some people have the ability to work with these kids, just how to engage and then to start working on teaching speech. Slow down when you talk to the child. Give them time to respond. They're like a slow computer. If you keep clicking on the computer, it freezes. Right. Get in their face too much, they freeze. Then working on turn-taking, all kinds of little things. Because that teaches the child to wait, and skills like being with utensils, putting on clothes, and you should be able to get progress, and the child likes going to therapy. If you get more speech, more turn-taking, and more skills, you're doing the right thing, and cut way down on the forced eye contact. That just causes sensory overload. Mm-hmm. In my program, which 2 teachers did in the basement of the house, the emphasis was speech, lots of emphasis on turn-taking, and emphasis on skills, like learning how to use utensils when I ate.
Yeah. So, Dr. Grandin, I agree with you. We've had this experience with our son, Avram, who I think we told you about. He's a very, very talented artist. He's very, very, emotional and sweet, but he was put on wait lists for certain things, and he still, at 10 years old, struggles with them. So he got the turn-taking program right in school, but he didn't get speech therapy, and he still has an accent, sort of an affectation. So can you explain a little bit more for our listeners who aren't that familiar with the process, why early intervention is important? And why do you think in North America, because we're originally from Canada and you're saying it's a problem in the States, it's not taken seriously?
No, it's also about a lot of stuff, this wait list. And one thing we've got to look at is training requirements for teachers. I just heard the other day that an occupational therapist had to have a doctorate. Well, we're not going to have enough occupational therapists if we require that. We have to start looking at very much how much training is required. I mean, let's look at what's happened in medicine. I went to the doctor recently, and it was a physician's assistant that worked on me, checked me out. And that's a person, instead of having an 8-year degree, they might have a 5-year degree.
And I agree with you. You mentioned
that. Another big problem is the cost of education.
Yeah. You mentioned that volunteers or retired teachers or grandmas who are even willing to take sort of a short training could be helping with stuff like this.
Well, exactly. And it can be a pretty short training, like 1 week, something like that, to work with the little kids. Mm-hmm. Because the worst thing you could do is just let them zone out on phones and electronics. That's what you don't want to have them doing. Mm-hmm. And, this is a problem in a lot of places. I mean, other countries too, there's problems with it, not just the U.S. I've heard about big wait lists in Canada too.
Canada was terrible.
And this is recent.
And can we also discuss the financial support for the parents? Because in Canada, I waited 2 years to get any payout. So out of my pocket, I paid for additional therapies and things he used, like a tablet to work on his language or expression. Do you think that that's something that should be streamlined as well?
No, I think we're going to end up having to do a lot more local stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was recently, within the last year, out at a library. I suggested that they start library play. You can't call it therapy for legal reasons.
Yeah.
But that's what we're going to be doing. And because we're going to have to start doing some of your own programs. Because the worst thing you can do with a 3-year-old that's not talking is to do nothing.
Absolutely.
You already have a diagnosis. He's not talking or she's not talking.
Right.
Now we have to rule out deafness. We've got to make sure they're not deaf and they don't have something wrong with their throat. But the therapies are pretty much the same, regardless of the diagnosis. Once you've ruled out deafness, you have to do. But you've got to get these kids engaged. And what I've observed is that some people just have the knack. I don't think they just have the knack. They know just how hard to push to get the kid engaged without going into that field.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more stuff just locally because for many things, I've been around now for 50 years. It takes scientific research. I've been involved with that for 50 years. Scientific research used to own livestock stuff. And compared to the 70s, the money's dried up, and it's dried up all around the world. Not just the U.S., it's in other countries too.
Mm-hmm.
Research funds have dried up. I can remember in the 70s, money flowed like water.
That's unbelievable to me. That's unbelievable and amazing. So what you're sort of discussing is almost a more practical approach that a child doesn't need a 25-page and 6-month evaluation to be helped. Because if they're not speaking, they're not speaking. Doesn't matter if they're autistic or not.
And there's 3 ways that speech is messed up. It's real simple. We've ruled out deafness. But even though they're not deaf, the child may not be hearing auditory details. They might say cat, or sat. They might be just hearing ah. And I certainly wouldn't be talking about my pet sat. I'd be talking about my pet can't. And even now I have to figure that out by context. So my speech teacher would slow down, enunciate the consonants. She'd say the word just the regular way, like cat. And then she'd say ta, ta. So it's auditory processing where slow processors stage, they're not hearing some of the hard consonant sounds. Then I also have trouble getting my speech out. Let's express it. And then another kind of kids, your echolalic, where they'll memorize almost an entire movie. And they'll just repeat that movie, and then they'll want to play that movie over and over and over again. And then with the echolalic kid, they're saying clear speech, but they don't know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So what you want to do with that kid, let's say it's a Disney movie, well, we go back and I'm going to have to get the movie out and play it.
Mm-hmm.
And take lines out of that movie that the kid uses and work them into the real world.
Moshe, talk to Dr. Grandin about your theory on nonverbal. Moshe doesn't like the term nonverbal because he says everybody's verbal. It's just that you have to work to understand them.
I think for me, it was very challenging because I was diagnosed very late in life, and I grew up in Canada, in Western Canada, where we used to throw around the terms that we don't use anymore, like high functioning and low functioning and nonverbal and verbal. And I have had the privilege to meet a lot of children that are labeled as nonverbal. And it used to really annoy me that they were just, well, my child is nonverbal. I said, your child is fully verbal. He's just not using language that you understand. He's trying to get his point across in the way that he understands.
Or maybe he needs to be taught how to type.
Exactly. Picture boards are a great idea for that. And learning how to type, if they can type, picture boards, which can be used.
That's right.
Because communication is more than just speaking a language that the average person can understand. And I always say that if you take the time to listen to these children, you're going to understand what they need a lot more than if you just label them as nonverbal and leave them be.
I think what a lot of parents would like to know, honestly, Dr. Grandin, is we watched your movie. We're big fans of yours. We've listened to all your TED Talks. You struggled with speech when you were younger. You would have been, I guess,
Yes, I did.
as nonverbal. And now you're so successful. What steps went into helping you do that, and how can you help their children to be that way?
Well, I had very good early speech therapy. I also had no signs of epilepsy, which usually improves speaking. The other thing is being brought up in the family. Manners and social skills were taught in a much more structured way. You were taught to say, you were taught to say please and thank you. When I did something like stir my drink with my mother didn't scream no. She'd say use the spoon. People think that's disgusting when you put your finger in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I call that teachable moments.
Most just stepmothers
And
very
grown-ups
much like that.
corrected little kids. So like if I touched too much stuff in the stores, back in the 50s, the store staff would say only touch the things they're going to buy.
Right.
There was a tendency to give the instruction instead of screaming no.
Mm-hmm.
But
I have lots of granddads come up to me, grandmoms come, and they discover they're autistic later in life and have got good jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I was nonverbal until 4. I can remember the frustration of not being able to talk. I can also remember the frustration once I learned how to talk, I couldn't respond quickly.
mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't give me a chance to respond. I was like a slow computer or a phone on one bar of service.
Right.
It took time for me to respond.
These expectations that are put on people who are neurodiverse to conform to the standard that's expected of them. And it's very frustrating.
The way my mother looked at it, not them real thinking about that, there was high expectations, some accommodation. There's some things that have to conform. You can't be a rude, filthy, dirty slob.
Exactly.
Using a lot of bad language to people off. You can't be doing that. But let's just give an example. Okay, sound sensitivity. And nobody hardly knew about that. We would go on vacation and I was 5. And we traveled up on the deck. And when the horn went off, I flung myself on the deck and started screaming.
Right.
Okay. The accommodation was to let
Hello?
it was made where I did not have to ride the ferry right next to the horn.
Right. That would make sense.
Yeah, Moshe and I did
and
a whole...
that's what I call high expectations with some accommodation. I was expected to be at gatherings, separate room I could go play in, and they gave me a way to exercise during family gatherings.
Yeah, Moshe and I did a whole episode on reasonable versus unreasonable expectations or accommodations. And it does seem like these days there's a lot of push toward allow the autistic person to do what they want and just, as you said, be on video games all day long and just accept them for who they are.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I just, I'm working on updating one of my books right now, and I just looked at the latest research on video games. For people on the autism spectrum, it's not all right. And then screen is limited, and the young adults that are addicted to video games, and some very good success with slowly replacing the video games with automobile mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
Actually gone into the repair field, and they found that fixing them was more interesting than the video games.
Well, of course, because it has a real world effect. I think that a lot of people are sort of letting their children be babysat.
Like what they did with me for family gatherings when we all gathered dining room table, like for Thanksgiving, holiday. The rule was I had to sit at the table and quietly eat and take turns talking for 20 minutes. And then I could ask the excuse. Now, if dessert didn't get served up that time, I didn't get any. But if I just had this more than I could stand, I could leave in 20 minutes. If dessert was served, dessert was.
Mm-hmm. We still do that with Abram.
Exercise.
Yeah, we still
so we did. Yeah, and then what we did with, we went to my grandmother's house. She was in the 50s. So I was allowed to run up the fire stairs and try to beat the elevator, which gave me a burst of hard exercise when we beat the elevator.
That's amazing.
So just clever little things that my mother figured out. And no, I'm going to go to family gatherings. I'm not going to be totally disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
We could do normal stuff with accommodations. And I just gave you some examples.
And that's amazing because Moshe feels the same way, and it's an unpopular opinion these days. He says, I don't want to be accommodated. I want to be pushed.
Right.
But, I mean, with reasonable accommodations.
Because
yeah, now I said we talked about accommodations at the university,
right.
And some of the important ones. And what happens with a lot of individuals about accommodations at the university, and one is extra time on tests. A lot of people need that, and sometimes they don't always use it, but the fact they know they have it, then they don't panic. Another big problem area is LED lights that flicker.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a problem for 20% of neurodiverse. They can see flicker on LED lights, and it's like being in strobe light.
I'm
and
like
that
yeah. I struggle with
something where they need new construction. Let's not use those kind of lights. And one of the ways you can detect the lights, because I don't see it, is to take video with you in slow motion. So the lighting, and the other thing is I do not remember long strings of verbal sequential information. Present. I need to write down the steps for doing a task, like a pilot's checklist. If I have to close out the cash register at the store, I want step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, pilot's checklist format. Now, those are very simple interventions that can make a big difference. They're essential. Now, a lot of other stuff that's going on I don't think is essential.
Absolutely.
No, I agree. So what I'm hearing, the theme is accommodating people towards being successful, but not accommodating them towards stagnation.
That's right. Because I'm seeing parents doing everything for their autistic kid.
Right.
And the kid's not learning how to do anything for himself. I'm seeing teenagers that they're doing well in school, okay, speaking, and they've never gone shopping by themselves. They've never ordered food in a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They're not learning bank account. They're not learning basic life skills. Because everything's done for them. Seeing that way too often.
It's very frustrating, and I feel like it's a result of the fact that people either are told that the child is incapable of learning life skills, or alternatively, that the effort and the work that goes into repetition and continued reminding before a skill becomes solidified in their skill set or in their tool belt is a lot. So if you have to continue to teach, for example, a child how to order food in a restaurant, over time, if you're particularly impatient, you might say, you know what, I'll do it from now on and you don't have to worry about it. And you may think that you're helping, but what you're doing is you're teaching the child that they don't have to learn how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem.
That's the problem. I'm seeing this all the time. I'm seeing some parents, especially the moms, saying, I can't let go.
Mm-hmm.
When I suggest that their child should buy something by themselves.
Yeah. I find that's a little bit of a problem within the community because I am the mother of an autistic son. Autistic sons or autistic boys seem to be treated very specially, I find. And I'm seeing that a lot within my peers, and I've always disagreed with it. A couple of things that you brought up again, I've disagreed with the doing everything for your child because they're going to be an adult. You're not raising a child, you're raising an adult.
Well, this is the problem. They're not learning life skills. And I see parents to put all this emphasis on academic skills. I've seen students graduate from college with honors and not be able to handle the workplace because they never learned any working skills.
Right.
And that needs to start hopefully around age 11.
That's very much like Moshe. He was missing an entire skill set. So he went out on his own and he was fine at certain things, but certain things he had no idea.
And that's because there was no intervention, not only because of the time that I lived. I mean, not to say that your time was not even more, in terms of research, Dr. Grandin, but when you end up in a position where, and I'm going to use a term that I also very much dislike, is you don't look autistic or you don't look like there's something wrong. So people just assume that you must behave. And you have this, they like we did an episode, Leah and I, on the uncanny valley of autism, where a person appears to be quote unquote normal, but there's just something a little off or a little bit struck, like still, there's just something about them that makes people very uncomfortable because they appear so, I don't know, normal-like, but they're not actually, they need that support. And you set expectations where over time you simply learn that you are not capable of doing this or that or the other thing, but then, you know, you go your whole life without learning how to balance a checkbook or how to keep a budget or how to clean a home or how to
Well, I learned
wash
how to
yourself.
keep a budget
Like that
when I was a little kid.
that's incredible. The
When I
amount
was
of
6 years old,
adults that don't learn these things.
I remember it very well.
And it's
And like,
frustrating.
because there were these little things that I attended. My memories are like little phone pictures.
Mhm.
And when I was 8 years old, 50 cents a week for allowance. That's about $5 today. And there were certain items that were bought. They came out of allowance, like little kites and toy airplanes,
Mhm.
candy, and comics. And 50 cents could get me 5 Superman comic books.
Mhm.
But if I wanted the airplane that cost 69 cents, I had to save for 2 weeks.
That's amazing.
I was learning that at age 8.
And that's amazing. We do the same thing for our children, even Avram, where he'll be given money and he has to budget that money because these parents who are saying my child's not good with math or they don't understand numbers or they're never going to understand money, they can't practice something without literally practicing it. You don't have to give them hundreds of dollars, but give them $5 to budget. Like that's.
So I understood what the 50 cents could buy.
Mm-hmm.
And then to understand big amounts of money, I remember one of my favorite toys I got for Christmas was a table hockey set that you have to play with another person and has players that move on it and these rods that move the players. And that was given to me for Christmas. It was one of my favorite things. And I saw it in the toy store window and it was $20. Actually, that was a whole year's worth of a 10 to buy a hockey table. So a $20 bill was a hockey table. And 69 cents was I had to save for 2 weeks. Now to understand big amounts of money.
And that was a really important skill set to learn.
How do I understand $5 billion?
Right.
Well, I put it in large airport units. I can build a very nice large airport for $4 billion. And then I go, oh, you spent $4 billion on that stupid project?
Right, exactly.
Airport worth money on that? That's how I understand really big amounts of money is I put them in what I call big units.
Mm-hmm.
Big units.
If I can see the airport. Like our Denver airport, when it was built, cost $4 billion.
So you apply the value of the dollar to a real world concept or to a unit of time.
Yeah. So to understand these huge amounts of money, I said, well, how many airports would that be? Amount of money. Half an airport? 3/4 of an airport? 2.5 airports?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I understand. And when the big amounts of money, and when I say it, I see the Denver airport. I see an aerial view of it.
That's incredible. That's a really interesting way of
that is how I understand a huge amount of money.
Wow.
I see
I
zeros.
do that even now.
I see zeros and she sees airports. That's just mind blowing. The way
you did a project that dumb and you spent entire airports worth of money on that.
Right.
But you see, that makes that money real.
Exactly. How can you be so impractical when we can have an airport? I get it.
I
really
understand. Oh. Dr. Grandin, I wanted to ask your opinion. We're talking a lot about modification of an education of teachers in classrooms. So I was asking you, Dr. Grandin, when it comes to education of children, they have specialized schools and specialized classrooms. They call it different things, but you have, neurodiverse children learning in a single classroom setting, and then the other kids learn in a different setting. And in other environments, you have all the children mixed together in the same classroom, and maybe a child has a support worker or a therapist or someone that's in there with them and helps them in the ways that they need. Which model do you feel is the best for allowing a child to learn properly?
Well, I would prefer them to be in a regular classroom with a support worker. But the problem with that with autism is going from Einstein at one end of the spectrum to very severely impacted individuals where the regular classroom's just not going to work. Now, one thing I'm a big proponent of is developing strengths. If you have a child that's good at math, that's definitely not me, then that child can be moved ahead in it. Because if you make a kid that's good at math do baby little boring math, he's going to turn the behavior problem. So he can be moved ahead. My ability in art was always encouraged. I loved to build things and make things. That was encouraged, and we had all kinds of hands-on stuff in my school, like jigsaw, sewing, art class. I loved those classes. Take the thing the kid's good at and build on it. For one kid, it might be art. Another kid, it might be music. For another kid, it might be mathematics, and they need to be moved ahead in mathematics. Build up on the area of strength.
Avram is an unbelievable artist, and he's driven to do art to the point where at his school, so his school now is a weird sort of accommodation. We're in Jerusalem, and we literally had to go in there and sort of teach the teachers how to teach him, if that made sense, because they had really no idea. Because here what they do is they'll take all kids who have some issue and stick them together and not necessarily accommodate their strengths.
Well, that's the problem by mixing up all the apples and oranges together.
So what Avram has done is he's actually started teaching art in his school. So one day he said, you know what, I'm just going to bring a bunch of toilet paper rolls to school and show all my friends how to make toilet paper bat because they're not encouraging me. So I'm just going to carve myself out a place in this place.
Well, I think that's a good way to deal with it. No, and I was good at art, and I was always encouraged. And I was encouraged to draw a lot of different things. I would just draw the same horses over and over again. And I said, let's draw the entire horse. Let's draw the stable it lives in. Take that thing the kids fixate on, broaden it. Because, first of all, in art, you need to be doing art that other people might want. And it's probably not going to be the same horse head being drawn over and over and over again.
I keep encouraging him. I say, you're very good at animation. You're very good at this and that. Did you know that there are people who work for Disney who make lots and lots of money doing the things that you're doing? Right. You have to sort of pinpoint it and he's amazed. Exactly. He's like, wow, people want to pay me money for this thing that I love doing? That's crazy.
Well, that's the kind of thing we need to be doing.
Dr. Grandin.
And the other thing, I don't know if you've read my book called Visual Thinking, where I talk about the 3 different kinds of thinking that you can have in autism. We can have a person like me who thinks totally in pictures, thinks that my memories are photorealistic pictures, and terrible at abstract math like algebra. Then you have another autistic kid, he's a math mind. And there's research that shows that your mathematical thinker and your object visualizer like me are actual different kinds of thought. In my book, Visual Thinking, it gives to people who think in pictures, patterns, and abstraction. I've got scientific research in there that shows that visual thinking and mathematical spatial thinking are 2 different things. And then you have people that think in words. And in autism, you can get extreme versions of these. And the ones that think in words are oftentimes the history lovers, where they'll tell you everything about the favorite sports teams. Very, very good at facts. And I think one of the problems is that some of the teachers tend to be verbal. They don't understand these other kinds of thinking. And I didn't even know that verbal thinking existed until I was in my late 30s.
Wow, amazing. Because people, I think, understand your type of thinking the least because they associate it with genius and like super memories and things that a lot of people don't have. So I think it's probably the least familiar to the populace at large would be the extreme visual thinking that you have.
Yeah, you see, my memory literally is like little pictures on a phone. So the more things I got out and did when I was a child, then I have a bigger library of images that I can compare some new experience to. And so I've got to get these kids out doing lots of real activities. I want to really drastically cut down on this watching videos and playing video games all day.
Mm-hmm.
I was allowed to have an hour a day of television. Rest of the time I was outside playing, and that was 50s up on me.
Well,
Parents would say, well, just go outside and play.
well, that's amazing. In the 1950s, children had expectations, and children were raised to be polite. And it really does sound like it was almost like what they're doing now with a structured ABA, but it was everybody doing it. So your aunts, your uncles, your grandmothers, your grandparents. And that's amazing. I kind of wish society would go back there a little bit.
The grown-ups corrected little kids. Like let's say I was I was touching too much stuff in the stores. The grown-ups around corrected that. Grown-ups corrected little children in the 50s.
And this is, I think, sort of, they're pathologizing it and making it a therapy now, but I do think that it's something that most kids, even who aren't neurodivergent, should be having at this point, and they're not.
Well, this was standard upbringing. Another thing that was done in the 50s is when the kids were 7 and 8 years old, the parents had a fuzzy. You had to put on your good clothes and the guests served the snacks. Mm-hmm. Obviously, not serve the alcohol, but they served the snacks, took their coats. When the guests came in, we said, good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Boyd. We were not allowed to use their first names.
Of course.
And that taught social skills. And that was just standard in our neighborhood when I was 10 years old. I remember doing it.
And that's exactly the kind of thing that I was actually telling Leah about, and we talked a lot about on the show. Rather than raising your children as disabled or as incapable, it's kind of like you raise them as you would raise a child. But then when you hit an obstacle or you hit a roadblock or you hit a challenge, you might have to deviate a little bit in how you present the idea or how you teach the idea.
That's right.
But if you play to the strengths instead of the weakness, then you're not going to raise children that are bereft of skills. You're going to raise children with lots of skills in the things they can do and ways to overcome it in the things that they can't do. And that is far better than just having a child, as you say, being taught for 4 or 6 hours a day on how to look people in the eye. But they don't know, how to read and write and spell. It's very frustrating.
I think this expectation today that neurodivergent kids are not ever going to be capable, I think you need to raise your child with the idea of them succeeding, regardless of whether they're neurodiverse or not.
Right, absolutely.
Well, that's right. Well, then you look at all the famous people that call neurodiverse, heads of tech companies.
So many.
They're calling neurodiverse. Edison was called neurodiverse. Mm-hmm. And so when I'd be talking to businesses, I said, we need these skills. When I was out working in the meatpacking plants on getting equipment built and designing equipment, I looked at people that owned big metalworking shops that were definitely autistic. Mm-hmm. And they owned businesses, and they would have been the visual thinkers like me, and they could just see how mechanical things work. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems they got now is these stuff aren't being replaced, they're retiring out. And so the kids that ought to be fixing things in a factory, they're playing video games in the basement, and we need the skills.
I agree. If I could just fan out with you for a second. In one of your talks, I forget which one, but you said the coolest thing that made me actually change the way that I thought about the neurodivergent brain, which was, if there were no autism genes in the gene pool, we'd still all just be socializing around a campfire.
Yeah, that's right. I said that a long time ago.
Yeah.
But who do you think designed the first sphere?
Absolutely. A visual thinker, right? That makes sense. But
a visual thinker that's telling you away at a rock. I was just, now I'm supposed to be a thinker. Mm-hmm. I was just in London at the British Museum, and it had like a 4,000-year-old hand axe just was chipped out of stone. Not to make me, I thought they could get it. Mm-hmm. If they made out of, stone, chipping it.
So you brought up eye contact right at the beginning, and I really just want to discuss this, not just with you, but with Moshe. And I think our listeners know what our viewpoint on this is, but I really want to drive it home. Why do people think eye contact is so important? And why is it just absolutely not important at all? And why is it actually harmful to autistic people specifically?
Well, I think the problem is it causes sensory overload. But if someone's forcing, I'm finding that when I'm in a noisy environment, who has large processing problems, it's hard for me to look at the person's eye and hear at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kind of would go around and if I just got to hear, I just got to concentrate on the hearing. And the eye contact is forcing, the multitasking at once. My program had no emphasis on eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
My program that teachers did in the basement of a house emphasized speech and using my language. Turn-taking at things, teaching me how to exhibit a response.
Absolutely.
And then
so much
still
more
with like
useful.
food with utensils.
Yeah, that's absolutely so much more useful than, like, what is this obsession, Moshe, you think, with neurotypical people on the eye contact thing?
Well, they think it's important, and and I can do eye contact now, but a lot of neurodiverse individuals at that ABA where they just force the eye contact, it just goes in a sense of overload.
They have this conception that eye contact, same as touch, is connected to trust. If you can't look someone in the eye, then you're not trustworthy. If you can't shake someone's hand, then you're not trustworthy. And I think that's not.
Well, I've learned how to shake hands. Let's talk a little bit about desensitizing some of the sensory stuff.
Well, you have to.
If a kid doesn't like the sound of a vacuum cleaner,
right.
One of the things that can help that is have the kid turn that vacuum cleaner on and off.
Mm-hmm.
When they turn the noisy thing on and off, I've seen vacuum cleaners sort of favorite playthings when the kid was allowed to control the machine and turn the noise on and off.
That's a brilliant thought. I wanted to switch gears a little bit, Dr. Grandin. The first conversation that we had right back when we were sort of trying to get you on the show, you talked to me a bit about your conception of how the security line at the TSA in airports can be improved. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that again.
That is true. We traveled with
It's sort of like letting out. I'm sorry about interrupting. This is one of the problems I still have with short processor speed. I have a hard time timing when to move into a conversation. I know it's rude, and I still have a problem with that.
That's so
well, I've laid out lots of cattle handling facilities,
mm-hmm.
and it's sort of like laying out cattle handling facilities. But the other problem that you see at airports is a lot of airports weren't originally built for the security line, so they just have to cobble something together, that will work. And sometimes, they'll have to fit around things like columns and hope the roof is holding up. So you have to design around that. I mean, I have that same problem with designing cattle handling facilities. You can't take the columns out of the building. People are going to have to go around them.
Exactly.
So if I can summarize.
It's sort of like laying out cattle handling facilities, and when you do new construction, it's much easier to lay out something that's much better.
So if I can summarize, you're thinking that you can do for people at airports what you did for the cattle, to keep them calm and to keep them comfortable and to just make things run smoothly. Or not you're thinking, I'm sure you can do this because you knew you can do that. But just to summarize for people who might not understand, like, the concept.
Well, I'm just thinking of the lines, how you set the lines up.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, sometimes they get really, 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 really super good.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like I see things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things I did, one time there at the dentist, I did really good fixing me up on frozen jet purchase. And that really delays flights. It's horrible. I think I could fix that.
I believe you.
That's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that a visual thinker could fix.
Right.
But if you look at different things, one thing I did with cattle handling when I first started, I went to every feed yard in Arizona and I looked at cattle.
Right.
And I kind of took the good parts of the designs and put them together into new systems. And threw out the bad bits of the design. There are certain layouts that just don't work. I mean, one of the things now that I'm older, it's airport security. I want a place to sit, put shoes back on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Airport security was very stressful for us when traveling with Avram because it was a bad experience for both Moshe and Avram because people are touching you and shoving you and you have to take items of clothing off and you have to put them on.
Well, one of the things, okay, let's talk about how we get an autistic kid to do airport security. First of all, no surprises. And our TSA has good websites that tell all the procedures. So there's no surprises. That makes sense. Sometimes the guards are going to have to touch you, even if you don't set off a detector.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even practice that at home. But no surprises. Anything new like that, let's have no surprises. The other thing I would do with the airport is work to make it interesting. Let's say you've never been on a plane. Well, you might go out to the airport and watch planes take off. One of the things that TSA does do here is some airports, they'll do practice runs where you can take the kid there and you can practice it. So it's not a surprise. You take anything new like that, it should not be a surprise.
That's brilliant.
It is.
The other thing is make the whole experience interesting. Now, can you imagine when you go up in the airplane, when it's going to be like look out the window from above the clouds, and then you can look pictures up online of that. Make something new interesting. I was used to be afraid of flying because when I was a senior in high school, I was in a very scary emergency landing.
Right.
And the way I got over that is I got to fly in a large airplane in the cockpit with a load of cattle. And that made it interesting. I was in the cockpit. The scary thing was now interesting.
Right. Change the content.
Scary and make it interesting.
When I was very little, my family used to winter. We were snowbirds, so we used to winter in Florida. And of course, this was in many years before the security changes of September 11th. So in those days, the children, the pilot was accessible. The children could just walk right into the cockpit and talk to the pilot and the co-pilot, and they usually give them like a set of little wings and make them honorary co-pilots for the plane. And of course, because of security, tightening up in the post 9/11 world, I find that planes are a lot less accessible, and especially if you're neurodiverse and you have a lot of fears or a lot of oversensitivities, there's a lot less support on the plane because everyone's so concerned with security and everyone has to stay seated and everyone has to know where they are and they can't access the areas of the plane that could be compromised. But you have these children that are, especially on long flights.
Well, the thing to do is to explain, first of all, why they do this.
Right.
You see, so that there's a reason for that. Now, that's a little kids often can still see the cockpit like when the boards, at least in the U.S. they can. That's for little kids.
Air Canada does that too.
Do they?
Yeah.
Hey, also, you can look up all kinds of videos online of what cockpits look like. It's just all available online. But taking something that's scary, make it interesting. I mean, I remember going on a plane after I'd had that very scary emergency landing, and when the plane put the gear down, that was really loud. I thought the bottom of the plane was falling. Well, to learn more about it, I want to hear the sound of putting the wheels down. I don't want them to land without wheels.
Yeah.
So if I learn, well, that sound means that the plane is putting its gear down. This was a fairly small plane. It only held like 20 passengers.
Oof, that's scary.
It was a small plane. But when that thing put the gear down, it was really loud. But if you learn more about it, I want to hear that when we're coming in for landing. I want the wheels down on the front. If you learn about something, and there's plenty of videos and things online, take something scary, make it interesting. And then reasons for why things are done. We have to keep the plane safe. That's why we have these procedures.
Exactly. Explain the security procedures. Explain why. I mean, for some
That's why you have it. You see, and that it's not just arbitrary. There's a reason for that.
So do you think in general...
The same thing with, let's say a kid's going to go on a school bus for the first time. Well, it'd be nice to see the bus or we see pictures of it. So it's not a surprise. You're a grown-up kid now and you're going to be taking the school bus to school. you would handle that exactly the same way.
So do you think in general, a very good approach to raising a neurodivergent child is no secrets?
Yeah.
Just honesty. So if they ask something,
rather than saying no secret, no surprises.
right.
No sudden surprises. Like they need to know that guys sometimes touch you, sometimes don't. Well, we got videos where you can look that up and you can show it to you. You can practice it at home.
Mm-hmm. So just honesty.
No surprises. No surprises. So the other thing is giving some choice. I talked to a parent the other day where their 9-year-old autistic kid refused to put his cell phone in the x-ray machine. Well, you have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way mother would have handled that is, let's say it was maybe a 4-day trip, a short trip, because you have a choice. You can leave your phone at home, then you won't have it on the trip, or you have a choice of what you put it in. Our security has these dishes you can put the phone in, or you can put it inside your bag. There's some choices. Leave it at home, put it in this dish, or put it in your bag.
Mm-hmm. That's actually quite good.
There's certain things we have to comply, but there are some choices what you put it in, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives the kids some control.
Right. So my understanding, and it's also my understanding as well, is that the inclination to protect your neurodivergent child from everything and keep them from the realities of everything is the wrong approach.
Absolutely.
No, what we do if we're going to be doing airport for the first time is if they don't have the thing where you can practice or the airport's too far away to do that, then you look up everything online and there's all kinds of videos they can watch.
Mm.
I mean, let's say they're going on a plane for the first time. I remember my very first flight I was going to go on, and the flight that we ended up going by car. But, tell them, well, you'll be up above the clouds. Imagine how cool that's going to look.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure they have a window seat. I'm a big believer in kids having window seats.
I always had to have a window seat.
They need to be looking out the window. I'm not appalled. Well, on our flight, there's a 7-year-old kid on there glued to a computer with the shade down, never looked out the window once.
Right.
Right. So life is just passing people by now while they're numbing.
I think it's terrible. I've been on planes with every window shaded down. You have a dark, gloomy plane. I hate that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get on, I got early boarding, so I open the window and hope I have an aisle seat or be left open. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But it takes the new things. The basic principle is no surprises.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Rather than no surprises.
No surprises. We have to actually maybe do an episode on that completely. It's a great concept.
No surprises, and then there's problems that can happen, like weather, for example.
Mm.
And flights can be late because they have to fly around the thunderstorms. See, the more stuff you just sort of learn about how it works, then interest. Make something interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
You make it interesting, then it's less scary.
And then when it happens, they'll know. They'll be like, okay, I understand. This is what we talked about.
Understand, flight was canceled. We're going to have to rebook. And we have to spend a night in the airport, which I've done.
Oof.
Oh, my goodness.
Not fun. I'll tell you what the big sad surprise was. 3 o'clock in the morning, they brought out these giant floor polishers. And I can forget about sleeping.
Oh, that was not a pleasant surprise.
Big monstrous things at the Chicago airport.
Not a pleasant surprise.
Well, just laid out on foot seats. Just as going to sleep, and they brought these things out, and they were huge things that people rode on.
Zamboni.
I remember very well.
Yeah. Got it.
But even when you go to the airport, they can watch there at the gate. They can watch the plane coming in.
I could.
Yeah, I did that.
I did. We would just sit there and watch the planes take off and land and take off and land.
I did that. I mean,
well, I don't know. That's something you can do just about anywhere. Go and watch planes take off and land. That makes them interesting. That makes them interesting.
Makes them interesting. Makes them fun. All right. Well, do you have any final things?
And I would do the same approach with the school bus.
Right.
The same approach with going to a new school. It would be ideal if the kid could visit the new school before they went there. If that's not possible, then I'd look at the website, learn as much about it, maybe some of the fun courses or things they do at that school so the kid would look forward to going to the new school. I would take the same approach to the new school as I would with an airplane. Or let's say we're going to, let's say something fun, you're going to Disneyland. Well, let's look at all the stuff we can do. Then the kid can pick something out to do there. No, it's always try to give the kids some choices and some control. Like going back to the ferry. Yes, I was going to go on that ferry. Absolutely. But I could ride downstairs
away from the
under
horn.
the deck in the cabin. That was the accommodation.
Dr. Grandin, we have to wrap it up. Could you tell us what you're working on right now? You mentioned that you're working on a book.
Oh, I just started working on some revisions, and one of the things I'm really putting in there, is just high expectations with some accommodations. Let's take clothes that itch, for example. Well, let's find some clothes that don't itch. Another thing to do is wash all the things that go against your skin. Find underwear that doesn't itch. I have to make some accommodations. I buy pants at Walmart, and I wash them 3 times before they're good enough for a long airplane trip. Mm-hmm. That's something we still do now. That doesn't mean that the child has to be wearing sweatpants all day.
No.
And give them some choice. We can go in the store and get some choices. And you are going to wear shoes, might have some choices. I've always tried to give some choices.
Yeah.
In things. Yes, I had a petticoat that itched. Well, what was done was to take the undershirt, tuck it into my underpants.
Right.
So the petticoat waistband did not touch my skin. That's a very simple accommodation. It worked. Mm-hmm. I was expected to wear that petticoat. But I had on underwear that protected me from it.
It is, but it's so important that the child or the adult in question is able to express that. Moshe doesn't like certain pillowcases, but he didn't express that for a while, and he would just sort of toss a turn and I would say, "What's wrong?" And he'd say, "I don't like this pillowcase." I said, "So why didn't you say so?" And he said, "I didn't know that I
get a different pillowcase."
Exactly.
Yes.
So I said, "Honey, let's change your pillowcase."
Some accommodations are acceptable and some are not.
Well, a different pillowcase. That's a simple accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
You're not replacing the entire bed.
No.
Yeah, that you are replacing a pillowcase that goes against your skin. That's the same approach that was used with me with his petticoat that had a little cotton undershirt. I could tuck into the underpants, and then when the petticoat didn't actually touch my skin around my waist.
So now it is the simplest of accommodation that affects nothing in our life. And when we go shopping for sheets, I make him stick his finger in the package and I say, "Is this okay?" And he goes, "Yes."
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. You're making some accommodation.
Exactly.
We figure out how to do it. Because if I did not go on the ferry, I wouldn't have been able to go on vacation.
And that's...
No, the expectation is you are going on that ferry.
Right.
But we're going to make an accommodation for you to sit away from the horn.
And that's a great thought to close on. The idea that something as simple as just changing the place that you sit allows you to have doors open for you and go from there. Dr. Grandin, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
And wonderful to talk to you today. I hope I gave you some good ideas, and I think some people might like my book, Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions. Has lots of stuff in there on getting jobs.
We'll post the links to your books. And thank you so much, Dr. Grandin. It was such a pleasure.
Okay, wonderful to talk to you.
Have a nice day.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Well, that's the end of our episode, and now you know one autistic just a little bit better. Now, something you may not know about some autistics is that we often struggle with ending social interactions. So, Leah?
It's okay, Moshe. I'll take care of it. Thank you for listening to Now You Know One Autistic. See you next week.